Mccarthy, Fox News contributor and former assistant U.S. attorney for the prestigious Southern District of New York and author of the book Ball of Collusion, The Plot to Rig an Election and Destroy a Presidency. Matt Towery, attorney pollster, semi-retired, so he says. I don't believe it. Greg Jarrett, his new book is out, in about a week and a half, I guess.
Yep, about a week and a half.
And it's called Witch Hunt, the story of the greatest mass delusion in American political history. Okay. The very thing, this is how I hear it. Let me start with Andy. The very thing I hear Nancy Pelosi accusing President Trump of, a shakedown using taxpayer dollars and election interference, that happened for the Democrats. Do you see it?
Yeah, it did.
Go ahead.
Yeah, I absolutely see it that way. I also think Attorney General Barr is quite correct that, you know, we have to do what we can do to end this business of criminalizing our political elections, especially since it seems to be a one-way street. Exactly what they are accusing Trump of, the Obama administration committed. They actually, in 2016, the Obama administration's law enforcement agencies leaned on the Ukrainian authorities, which were very beholden to them under the circumstances. That's the reason Joe Biden was able to demand the firing of that prosecutor. Just as all that stuff we heard yesterday about how beholden Ukraine is to the United States, that started to be really true in 2014 when Yanukovych fled to Moscow and a regime took power in Ukraine that was much more ideologically disposed toward Obama's way of thinking in the world. The Obama administration became its most important ally. It was very dependent on it. And for that reason, they were able to lean on the Ukrainian law enforcement agencies and get them to investigate a key part of the Trump campaign, namely Paul Manafort, who was not only arrested or investigated and information about him conveyed from the Ukrainian authorities to the American authorities, someone who was a Ukrainian official that was tied to the Clinton campaign was involved in the leaking of investigative information from Ukraine into the American media that resulted in Manafort's being ousted from his position as campaign chairman of the Trump campaign. And that became the backbone for the collusion narrative that didn't start after the election. It was up and running in the fall of 2016.
Greg Jarrett, we've seen this movie before, that the only Russian interference in the election that I can tell that had, obviously if the New York Times was right, that the dirty Clinton bought and paid for Russian dossier with funneled money to an op research firm, to a foreign national who's not supposed to be involved in our campaign, but anyway, put on our elections, and then became the basis to spy on a president, a transition team, and at the time a candidate. Let me ask you this. It seems like everything, once again, that the Democrats are accusing the president of, they themselves are way more guilty of. And there's no evidence that the president did anything wrong here. Nothing.
The great irony, which the media continues to ignore as well as Democrats, is the Hillary Clinton campaign and Democrats colluded with Russia to accuse Trump of colluding with Russia. So Clinton colluded with Russia, which is the title of one of the chapters in my new book, but Trump didn't, and the Mueller report proved it, which is why the Attorney General William Barr has launched an investigation into the origins. So on the transcript between the two presidents, Zelensky and Trump, the president is asking Zelensky to provide any information or evidence that would be relevant to that existing U.S. investigation by the Attorney General. And they're actually bound to do it. 21 years ago, the United States and Ukraine signed an agreement. It's called the Mutual Legal Assistance in Criminal Matters Agreement. And, they are obligated, if they have any information relevant to a criminal investigation the U.S. is interested in, to provide us with that information. And vice versa. We give them information. So when you look at it from the legal standpoint, the president is simply asking Ukraine's assistance in a U.S. criminal investigation. Now, they should do it out of goodwill and also because we provide them with substantial assistance, but they must do it under the agreement, again, as I said, that was established 21 years ago. But if you listen to the crazy media and Nancy Pelosi, I mean, I'll just give you an example. There's a op-ed in the Washington Post today, Michael Gerson, and he writes, the president has pleaded guilty to an impeachable offense. Dick Blumenthal, the U.S. senator from my state, Connecticut, said of Trump, this is premeditated criminal conduct. It is none of that. This is a sensible, logical, reasonable conversation in which we're asking Ukraine for help. And by the way, at the end of the conversation, Biden's name is brought up, and obviously his quid pro quo, which could be criminal. He doesn't get immunity from criminal prosecution or investigation simply because he's running for president of the United States. So, Hillary Clinton obviously got immunity thanks to Loretta Lynch and James Comey. That shouldn't have happened, and it shouldn't happen with Joe Biden.
All right, we'll get to Matt. Matt, stay patient there, and he's standing on the first tee, ready to tee off when we're done, but we're going to hold these guys through the next half hour. Too much to get to. All right, as we continue, Andy McCarthy, Greg Jarrett, Matt Towery also with us. We'll continue, so much to get to into the next half hour. Matt, let's get your political take on this. Because what we're seeing is they want to race through this impeachment. They don't even want to stop and pass go and collect 200. They want to do this yesterday. What are the political ramifications, especially because we actually have their top candidate on tape doing the very thing Trump didn't do, which is shake down another country with taxpayer dollars for the purpose, in this case, of protecting a corrupt deal with his son, which probably broke and violated every ethics rule around, and laws as well. How does this play out politically?
Well, I mean, obviously Andy and Greg know all the details of this, and they're experts on it. The American people are not. And, I don't live in Washington. I'm out of all this business. And I can tell you, no one's talking about this thing. They don't care. We're not all glued to the TV set to find out what the next statement is from Adam Schiff or from the speaker. I think you're going to find some things that will start to happen. First of all, did you hear Speaker Pelosi say she thinks Russia has something to do with this? You can imagine if the public heard this, they would roll their eyes 8 times over again because they've had enough of it's Russia. They don't believe that anymore. The other thing that's going to happen is the public has a pretty good sense of fairness. So the shift today was away from the actual transcript because that didn't score any points. So now they've gone to, well, it's a cover-up because it's a move to a more secure server. Well, excuse me, didn't we hear that it was okay for a Secretary of State to move classified information to an unsecure server and in the end delete a lot of those messages and actually have some of the equipment destroyed? That was okay. But in a White House where there have been all kinds of leaks that allegedly a conversation with a foreign president moves to a more secure server, which I would assume is not going to be destroyed and can be recovered. I mean, that's just a joke. So where you're headed for this is sort of what's good for the goose is good for the gander. And you got Biden's situation with Bidengate in the Ukraine that was going on that was ended. You've got now a shift to some issue about how they store the conversation that took place. The public is going to see this, and they're going to tire of it very, very quickly. The polling numbers aren't moving that much. The president, for whatever reason, has had some of the highest numbers he's ever had. I don't quite understand that, but I think it's good for him. And I think, quite frankly, the best thing that could happen to the man, nobody wants to hear it, is for them to take this flimsy case, at least it's flimsy at the moment, move as fast as they can, impeach the man, and see what happens. Because as you recall, Sean, I was Newt Gingrich's chairman back when he was speaker, and we wrestled with this entire issue of impeachment. And it did not play well at home in Newt's own district.
Take a break. We'll come back.
This is What's Right with America. You're listening to the Sean Hannity Show.
I said, we're not going to give you the $1 billion. They said, you have no authority. You're not the president. The president said. I said, call him. I said, I'm telling you, you're not getting $1 billion. I said, you're not getting $1 billion. I'm going to be leaving here. And I think it was, 6 hours? I said, I'm leaving in 6 hours. If the prosecutor's not fired, you're not getting the money. Oh, son of a Got fired.
Son of a bee, got fired. Well, he did that, and he had been trying to do that because he was warned by the New York Times and others that his son was being investigated by that prosecutor. Why else would a sitting vice president of the United States of America demand a Ukrainian prosecutor be fired, leverage our tax money to do it, shake them down the way he did, and not disclose the massive conflict of interest, putting aside the fact that his son made millions of dollars with no seeming expertise at all in Ukraine, energy, oil, or gas. And then it even got worse when he partnered with John Kerry's stepson and Whitey Bulger's nephew. That Whitey Bulger, the murderer Whitey Bulger's nephew. And, well, the Bank of China, yes, with ties to the government, gave them $1 billion contract and another $500 million contract on the issue of private equity, another area of, quote, expertise that they had no experience in. Anyway, Greg Jarrett, Andy McCarthy, and Matt Towery remain with us. Andy, I'm watching this. You've read this. I've read it again. I've read the transcript again. And, to me, the whistleblower complaint is just, it's not even a whistleblower. It's somebody as a prosecutor, I doubt you ever relied on hearsay from individuals. And it certainly wouldn't hold up in court. But the idea that the whistleblower, who obviously, in my view, had a lot of help putting that together, seemed very lawyered up to me, that somehow that would be more important than the actual transcript, because when you read the transcript, do you see anything in that transcript that concerns you?
No, Sean, and I'd like to, because you just played that clip, if I could, I'd like to sort of pile on a point that Greg made a couple of minutes ago. It's a commonplace. It was throughout the 20 years that, or close to 20 years, I was a prosecutor in New York, for the government of the United States to request assistance from foreign governments when they have evidence that's relevant to Justice Department and FBI investigations. That happens all the time. And, considering the part of the conversation that people are between Trump and Zelensky that people are zeroed in on is obviously the Biden portion. As I think you're pointing out, the Biden portion comes after the main ask that President Trump sought, which was assistance in Attorney General Barr's investigation of the origins of the Trump-Russia investigation, which, whether Democrats like it or not, is a legitimate investigation of the Department of Justice that the United States has every right, and it's a common.
Wouldn't it actually be a responsibility, knowing... Now, let's go back. This has now been confirmed even again this week, that John Durham continues to be looking into the Ukrainian involvement in the 2016 elections. When the president refers to CrowdStrike and the investigation, he's like, well, I hope you can help my attorney general out, because we're actually looking into the truth about election interference. I would think that that's the right thing to do for the country. So now the question is, if somebody like you, who worked at the prestigious Southern District of New York, and you are the one, first World Trade Center bombings, the conviction of the blind sheikh, that was all you. You worked on very big cases, and you see what's happening with Joe Biden and his shakedown and his son's shady business deals. I don't care how you shake it. There's no way you can look at that and say that looks good on paper. And then what they're accusing the president, there's no there. So then how are we at this point? What happened?
Yeah, well, Sean, this is why I wanted to raise something new, or at least that I don't think has been discussed enough. I completely agree that there's a relevance tie-in to the Biden's activities with what was going on in Ukraine that is germane to Durham's investigation. But here's what I don't understand. As a totally separate matter, whether it's germane to the genesis of the Trump-Russia investigation or not, why can't the Justice Department open a Foreign Corrupt Practices Act investigation on the Bidens? As we saw from the Mueller investigation, you don't need a whole lot to open an investigation. You don't even need a crime on the basis of the way they conducted that thing. And since we've been talking for a couple of days, I mean, on one day I see Bill Weld says the president should be getting the death penalty. And then, we spend 2 days talking about, angels dancing on the head of a pin, whether we can make a campaign finance violation out of the conversation between Trump and Zelensky. Seems to me that there's at least as much evidence that cries out for a Foreign Corrupt Practices Act investigation of the Bidens as there is a campaign finance investigation of the Trumps.
When you hear Biden, do you hear what I hear? I hear a shakedown.
Yeah, of course I do, but I'm not offended by shakedowns in the context of foreign policy, Sean. I think that... Okay,
but what about the personal enrichment of somebody that has zero qualifications, apparently? I haven't seen any, and that being his son.
I'm all for investigating that. That's what I'm just saying. Yeah. I don't even think it needs to be tied into Durham's investigation. I think there's an independent basis to investigate it.
I go back to Politico again. This is a different article, Greg Jarrett. This was in June of 2016. The headline, Russian government hackers broke into the DNC servers and stole the Trump Oppo research, and the hackers had access to the information for approximately a year. In the contents of that article, it says CrowdStrike designated 2 groups that gained access to the DNC's information. Right. One codenamed Cozy Bear broke into the DNC last summer and had been monitoring the committee's emails and chats. The other group, CrowdStrike, dubbed Fancy Bear, had hacked into the DNC in April, aiming to get op research files. The Fancy Bear breach is what tipped off DNC officials, and they were able to gain access to all DNC research staff computers. Now, when Trump mentions CrowdStrike and all this stuff, he's talking about the 2016 election, which I thought, I would actually argue that he has a constitutional duty.
Under the Take Care Clause.
Correct. And that the President of the United States sees to it that all laws are faithfully executed.
Right. Yeah, no, CrowdStrike... One of the great mysteries and really outrageous acts is that the DNC would not give their server to the FBI, and they would only allow CrowdStrike, the cybersecurity firm, to analyze the DNC server. And there are serious questions about the legitimacy of CrowdStrike. So the president is bringing it up in the context of, the origins of the Trump-Russia investigation and hacking and so forth. This is a legitimate official Department of Justice investigation. And as Andy was pointing out just a moment ago, there is a long history of the United States sharing information with foreign nations about criminal investigations, and they also share with the United States. So the president is simply asking very reasonably to do this. And one of the most outrageous acts of the media occurred yesterday. The big, bold headline all across the top of the New York Times is Trump asks for favor. And, most everybody who didn't actually dig deep into the article would be in the impression that Trump was asking for the favor of investigating Biden. And provide evidence against his potential political opponent. That's not what the conversation was about at all. As you point out, Sean, it was about a completely different matter, the official Department of Justice investigation. So the media deliberately did that. The New York Times headline, was a knowing, willful lie, a misrepresentation to the American public. But this is now rampant in the media. And again, I come back to my statement earlier. And Bill Bennett said this earlier today on Fox News. There is nothing in the Ukraine call transcript that is an impeachable offense. It was a normal, logical, sensible, smart conversation for the President of the United States to have. If you have evidence of a crime involving the United States, please give it to us. Conduct your investigation. If you produce evidence, hand it over to us. The President, as I wrote in my column a couple of days ago, has a constitutional duty under the Take Care Clause to enforce all laws, whether it be immigration laws, finance laws, or, yes, criminal statutes. If people, and I quote George Washington, who was the first to say, really, this is my most important duty. I cannot let people violate the law with impunity. That's George Washington. And every president swears on a Bible and raises their right hand to faithfully execute the laws and to enforce the Constitution. And in that context, this is precisely what the president was doing.
All right, let me go now to the political side of all of this and ask, Matt Towery, I don't think the country is going to look favorably upon this. We can already see, the divide is only getting deeper. There's a lot at stake here. Democrats now spend 3 years, comes out that they were lying. Adam Schiff, the biggest liar of all. Adam Schiff does a little parody thing yesterday. I mean, it was embarrassing. Now we see what? How does this go? Where does this go from here?
Well, first of all, let's talk for a minute about what you're going to see over the weekend. As I said, they've now shifted to there's a cover-up with a cover-up, and we talked about that ad nauseum. And what a phenomenal goose for gander irony that is, given what took place with Hillary Clinton. But you're going to see polls. They will be network polls. They will be other polls. Many of them, by the way that the data is collected, the way they're weighted, and with some of the questions that lead you into the answer, I'm sure you're going to see polls where people will say, the president should be impeached. Don't pay any attention to those polls. They won't mean anything. They didn't mean anything in Russiagate. They won't mean anything in this case either. What will happen is this. If the Democrats rush, as some press reports are saying today, move very quickly to move these articles of impeachment through, and if in fact there is a vote that will go to the Senate, these two gentlemen have just given a perfect case for why there's not anything to it. He'll be acquitted, and it's over. You know what happens then. Then you have a Donald Trump who has been made a Teflon president, and he will get reelected, probably at an overwhelming level. If they don't go to impeachment, try to drag this thing out, the country's just going to become wary of it. Because mark my words, at some point, Sean, something tangible and important in this country, not this nonsense, something big will happen. And everyone will sit there and say, why in the world was Congress asleep at the switch and not doing anything? Because the country's getting tired. They're really getting weary of this. And I tell you, I live in Florida. I just live in the normal man's land, and I just live the normal man's life. But I can tell you, here, nobody gives a you-know-what about this stuff. It's interesting to watch. It keeps us entertained, but it hasn't changed one opinion.
And, Andy, you're a pretty smart political observer. How do you see this politically, taking the legal side out of it for now?
Sean, I think that and Matt knows a million times more about this than I do, but it just seems to me that, you say what you say, but you vote with your feet. And when the Democrats are ready to get on the floor of the House and take a vote to authorize an impeachment inquiry, we'll know that they actually think they might be getting somewhere. It seems to me that for all the talk this week, nothing actually changed. Pelosi's announcement from the podium didn't change a single thing they were already doing. If you listen to Jerry Nadler, they've already been doing an impeachment inquiry for, a couple of months. So she didn't convene a committee, no vote, no nothing. I don't see it.
Stay right there. We'll come back. All right, final thoughts here. Greg Jarrett, okay, where are we going? And then we'll ask Andy McCarthy and Matt Towery, 30 seconds each. Go.
If Democrats are foolish enough, they'll proceed with impeachment. The moderate Democrats are really going to be on the fence. The freshman Democrats from the red districts that flipped blue, I don't think they're going to vote for impeachment. But we've seen this show before. If you go down the road to impeachment, it will backfire on the impeaching party. So, great. Go ahead, Nancy Pelosi. Go towards impeachment. You may, as Newt Gingrich has pointed out, lose your job as Speaker.
And Matt Towery, predictions.
Oh, I agree totally with what Greg is saying. I think that let's see what happens this weekend. It's the shift to the, quote, cover-up, see if they can make anything out of that, which I don't think they will be able to. And I agree, these Democrats who are in these marginal districts are going to start to become very worried about their future.
And last word, Andy McCarthy.
Sean, a smart friend of mine told me while this was unfolding that the problem with impeachment is that there's nobody who's really in charge of it. And then once the machinery gets rolling, even if they think it's a bad idea, it's hard to stop it. And I doubted it at the time, but I'm beginning to believe it's true.
All right. Thank you all.